I am presenting you the methodology of experiment about the attractiveness of objects contrast presented on specific background in dog's visual perception to find out whether or not the contrast of specific color of balls presented on artificial grass has affected to dog's visual perception and its decision or attractiveness. 12 dogs were recruited ethically from Lincoln Pet Can Do database, and owner permission forms were collected before the experiment. All of them were between 1 to 7 years of age and selected regardless of breed, gender, and neutral status. They were healthy and did not have any behavioral problem. They were normally motivated to interact with the ball. However, only 10 dogs really met the conditions and they were required to complete 10 sessions. Two types of objects were chosen in this study. The first, balls of different color as you see were made of the same material, so they have the same hardness, size, reflection, weight, without any decoration. The second was a sheet of artificial grass size 4 square meter as the background underneath the balls. The ball placed on artificial grass in the experimental room under the controlled brightness from electric light at 2400 lux were analyzed from three properties which are color, luminance, and orientation for the index of contrast. The results show that blue and green ball presented on green artificial grass were the most and the least contrast respectively, so they were selected to be used in this experiment. This diagram shows details of the experimental room. Only one door was used as the entrance. The windows in the room were shut to block outside light, so electric light was the only source of brightness. When the dogs arrived, they were walked on lead with the owner to get familiar with experimental environment. The recording camera was placed behind the artificial grass to record the dog's behavior during the experiment. The ball was placed 2 meters away from dog's releasing point on the artificial grass. There was a partition separating the room into two sections. This partition was closed between trials, with the dog lured by the owner on one side and the study area with a researcher on the other side, so that the dog and the owner were not able to see the study setup beforehand. When the trials began, the dogs were released and they were allowed to interact with the ball within a minute. Then they were put back on the lead by the owner while the next trial was prepared. If not, once a minute had elapsed, the dogs were collected on lead to the starting point again anyway. Two trials were conducted which were positive association trial and choice test trial. The positive association trial was the training to reward the dog when it selects an individual ball with verbal praise. Once the dog achieved the first ball, the other different contrast ball was placed on the same background. These trials were performed to equally retain the dog's motivation to both contrasts. The choice test trial would be performed last in each session. Two balls were placed 1 meter away from each other with opposite sides, and the dogs were asked to interact with one ball without any specifying. Verbal reward was not given with this trial to prevent the bias. This trial was performed to see the dog's behavior toward different contrasts of balls. Moreover, the balls were not placed more than 2 times consecutively on the same side to prevent the side bias. This video shows the choice test trial. The dog directly chose to the higher contrast ball. 4 parameters in choice test trial were analyzed as you will see in this spreadsheet. First target, the contrast that the dog initially moved toward. Final decision, the contrast that the dog finally selected by touching, pressing its muzzle, or gets closer to the object by 10 centimeters. First direction side, left or right hand side of the dog that it was moving toward in first target. Final direction side, left or right hand side of the dog that it finally selected to in final decision. And this is another video of choice test trial to support why this experiment needs 4 different parameters. At first, the dog moved toward the lower contrast ball, but changed direction to the higher contrast ball instead. During the experiment, some problems occur. For example, some dogs were not motivated to play with the balls, or could not exchange the ball by asking but only the treat in every trial. One dog shredded the ball continuously. Owner may not be able to control their dog to stand in the center position, and they accidentally gave a verbal praise in the choice test trial. And my solutions were to encourage with a short playing session or use a treat to increase motivation at that session. Emphasize the owner about importance of the method with the reasons. Have regular breaks every 2 or 3 sessions. Redo the incorrect trials. Stop the experiment if the dog were not motivated or show any behavioral problem. Thank you for your attention.